Okay, we are live, and hi everybody. So welcome back to one of our 50 and 50 interviews with myself and Dr. Amy here talking about our book research. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome Kayla Parker to be one of our 50 leaders talking about the book research that we have. And just very, very quick note, this is a live interview, and you're more than welcome, if anybody is watching this, to put any comments or queries that you may want to put to myself or Amy, or also obviously to Caleb. And we'll be happy to bring some of those sort of comments and questions in. But really, this is about transparency. We believe in filming these for transparency. Some of the insights that Caleb will give and all of the other interviewees that we've got may not make the book, in fact, but we want to make sure that there is a sort of a bank of content that you guys can take a lot of sort of insights from. Caleb, do you want to just sort of give a quick précis of where you're at in terms of you and the business, and perhaps why we will have got you on to sort of have a chat about this stuff?
Well, I guess Brave Corporation, we keep calling ourselves the next generation real estate company. Yeah. I think the future is flexible, and real estate traditionally hasn't embraced flex, and we believe it should, because that's what customers want. And so we're taking the traditional real estate business model and the flex model and blending it together. So hopefully that's why you're interested.
I hope so. And I think just to start with, where I'm going to go with this line of questioning, and sort of certainly with the way Amy and I will navigate this as a chat, is we're going to start quite broad, I think, in terms of where the market is at the moment and what it's doing, the struggles that it's got, and then perhaps sort of weave in there a little bit about what you just said about Brave there and why you're doing what you're doing, to sort of give some case studies and some stories around that sort of thing. So you mentioned there about some of the reason that you're doing what you're doing, but looking at your mission, which is to empower businesses to work where and how they thrive, which I think is a really interesting point about thriving, which no doubt, Amy, you're loving, because that's exactly your thing. Could you share examples of how companies are reevaluating the sort of the real estate leases? That's something that I think is being widely talked about. It's a perhaps a big concern the industry has, and how is that? How are they reevaluating their real estate leases to better align with the vision that you've got, basically, about helping their employees thrive?
Well, I think it's no secret that the way we work today is different than it has been pre-2020. In pre-2020, real estate sold white boxes to companies on 20-year leases, and then the company turned that white box into a branded box and told all their employees to fit into it every day. That's not the case anymore. And I think if you ask 100 people what they want from a workplace experience and where they work best, when, where, and how, you're going to get 100 different answers. So I think the future of real estate and what customers want is a way that can support every single person's way of working, which does mean real estate needs to become more flexible. We're seeing already, and I expect we'll see a lot more over the next couple of years, there's millions of square feet that have leases coming to an end. The ones that have already come to an end, we're seeing restructuring, a lot of downsizing. There are some companies that are expanding, but what's happening is they're looking at how they can support every single team member, and they're recognizing that not every single team member is going to come in every single day. And some people need to work closer to home some days. Some people are happy to work from home some days. So how can real estate support that? So we're really tuned in to making real estate move from product to service, and from being a static product to a dynamic service.
You talk about in your recent blog, which I loved, the 3 C's of CRE. Loved it. It was great. You talk about, I love your focus on community is one of the C's. So I'm a business psychologist, and in one of my past roles, we ran big projects to sort of crowdsource innovative solutions effectively. And it sounds like that's a little bit, that's one of your areas of focus, that you're really trying to understand customer needs. What would you say, how do you do that, first of all? So how do you go about understanding what it is that the customer wants? And are you seeing trends in terms of, what customers are asking for now that they maybe weren't asking for pre-pandemic?
I guess I'm sort of looking at this from a startup's mentality. And when a startup goes out to solve a problem, they're solving a problem for a specific type of customer. And so they really get under the hood of what that customer wants and needs, and they do a lot of iteration around that. And so for us, in the brand that we're building and the customer that we're serving, we're really focused on scale up companies that are attracting people with a growth mindset, so entrepreneurial mindsets. And so I think in general, in any business, but in real estate, we need to be thinking about who we're serving, and that can be different people for different real estate owners. But it's really getting to understand those people and have conversations with them and understand what they want. And going back to the whole 100 people, 100 different answers, this is where like that community and service comes in. What do people want? They want to feel like they belong. They want to be around like-minded people, people that give them energy when they come in. And they want to feel taken care of when they go somewhere. There's a reason that people like to go to the Hoxton Hotel, for instance, and work. And there's a reason that people go to certain cafes, because they feel taken care of, and that's their vibe, so to speak. So I think it's important that we in real estate understand who we're serving and understand what motivates them and energizes them and what vibe they like.
Let me just take on. I just want to ask a question about purpose. I mean, I think your point about I think you said moving real estate from a product to a service, right? Was that what I interpreted? Okay, so with that in mind, when we talk about the purpose of the office, there's often a lot of talk about what purpose does the office serve now. In your view, what is that purpose now, post-COVID, post-pandemic?
It depends on who you ask.
Okay.
Give me
the different sorts of people and what they might be.
So in the past, the office was where everybody had to come every day because that's where the computer was, that's where the boss was. But in a day today where everything can be accessed in the cloud, and you can connect with somebody on FaceTime or in this kind of way, or it's just so different. So what that does, though, is the more remote we become, the more used to having virtual communication, the value of in-person time and that face-to-face time skyrockets. So when you go to an event, for instance, and you see people you haven't seen in a long time, or like you feel like you've met them before because you've been interacting with them on social media for a year, and then you see them for the first time, there's a euphoric feeling that you have. And so to me, the purpose of the office is to facilitate these instances. And I don't think that needs to happen every day for everyone, but it needs to be able to facilitate that so people can tap in and get that for whatever they need on any given day.
And so there's lots of evidence emerging that I'm sure you're aware of that, some people would argue, well, we can get social connection from virtual calls. And the evidence is really clear that virtual calls are great, but they don't stimulate your brain in the same way that one-on-one connection or in-person connection does. And so it's a really important argument for well-being that we need to get people back to the office because it is better for our well-being. It's a problem if people stay at home all of the time, and there's a sort of rise in social isolation and stuff. I guess question for you, what can people in real estate do to make this return to work more appealing? What are the sorts of things that you're seeing happening to just, help people want to go back to the office?
I think when you were describing the context of the question just now, what popped in my head is that we have the five senses. And when we're in a virtual environment, the sense of touch is not being stimulated, so to speak. And I'm not a psychologist by any means, but I think when we come together, that sense of euphoria I described is because we do get to shake hands or fist bump or hug, and that's massively helpful. You can talk about reading people in the room because they're across the table from you and their facial expressions and all that. Maybe that's something there too. But I think in real estate, the binary structure of coming into an office every single day because that's where the office is, and you've got a 20-year lease, so we've got to go there, and you've got white walls and rows of desks. That static mentality is gone. I think now what needs to happen is it needs to be a destination. It needs to be an experience that takes over all of our senses. So when we go in, it's visually appealing and stimulating for the person that's coming in. And so what a certain type of person finds visually stimulating might be different from somebody else. So
Mm.
to me, that's where the whole community piece is. I was having a conversation earlier today about, fintech and AI over here. And those are different types of communities and ecosystems that can be built and branded into a building and deliver different experiences for those different customer archetypes, so to speak.
Mm.
And so to me, you come into a building because you want to be around the people that you need to connect with and you draw energy from. You need to have the visual and the different ways to be stimulated. But I don't like this whole conversation around return to office because it's good for our well-being. I
Mm.
would rather reframe it as the office is a tool in the platform of work, and that
Mm.
tool is there for you to use on the days that you need to do it.
Mm. Mm. So it's there to provide people what they need, as you said at the start, and whatever that might be, all sorts of different types of things. Yeah, I
And
love
this is
that.
where the phrase space as a service comes up. And our friend Anthony Slumbers talks about this a lot. And the idea of space as a service is it's the right environment at the right time for the right work you're doing in that moment. And you could go to different environments 5 days a week. One of those environments might be your living room, but you're choosing the environment you want on a given day.
Mm. Mm.
And that can lead into technology questions around what sort of technology can facilitate that, and what kind of data can we glean from it to learn how to serve those customers better.
Mm.
Can I just touch on a trend that I think you mentioned at the start around people adapting to a flex space strategy, let's say, and bearing in mind, and it's a bit difficult for me to comment on this because I've always essentially been within a flex environment, so I'm quite used to the way it flows and the incidental meetings of people and all of this sort of stuff. What I'm quite interested in is, have you seen those incidences when occupiers are moving from a sort of a very static lease environment, a static traditional desk environment, to a much more flex and hybrid option? And how have you found they've adapted to that transition? And I mean, both on the sort of the general lay person who is using and utilizing the space on a daily basis, and then perhaps the senior management and how they found it and adapted to it over time. Give me a sort of a story of how you've
Sure.
seen that happen.
So I won't name the company's name, but I'll give you their profile. Well-established company, SME though, probably about 45 people.
Okay.
They had their own office. Coming out of the last 3 years, that office, which used to be full all the time of people coming in every day, was half full. So the office that was theirs, it was half full, felt empty. It wasn't a great vibe when people did come in. Some of their team members needed to be there more often because of their at-home environment. They moved to a shared environment with us at 22 Bishopsgate in 2022. There was a big conversation around how that transition was going to go because are used to being in their own private sort of one company. Questions around privacy and all this stuff as well with the company being around other people. But what they ended up doing is they ended up taking, in our open plan shared environment, about 20 desks that were reserved for them in the same general area. That allowed those 45 people to share those 20 desks. So if 10 people came in one day, they didn't feel like there was no energy in the room because there were other companies around. But if they ended up having 40 people come in, they had additional seating for them. So the dynamic, for some people, they had to sort of shift up. Okay, I don't have my dedicated desk. It's not my desk. And they had to rethink how they utilize lockers and, what do they bring in when they come in, sort of thing. But ultimately, they felt like it was a year on from that. They felt like it was the right decision. It enabled a better energy when people did come in. And I guess back to your question about the senior management, I believe their previous offices had a few private offices for senior management. And here, everybody's in sort of on equal playing field. So I can't really speak to that. I don't know how that ended up being, but I can make an assumption based on some of the stuff that I saw anecdotally at a distance. The management would come in, and often you'd see them with the headphones doing their work or on the couch having one-on-one conversations. So does that mean they did the same thing before? I don't know. But that's the data that I have. So I don't want to make an assumption on it.
And so going back to the start of that story, you said one of the primary concerns of adapting from a traditional to a more flex offering, privacy was a main element of fear. Were there any others as well, or was that was the primary one?
It was the privacy and the lack of your own as an employee. You no longer have, this seat is no longer just yours, and it may not. And this seat that you're sitting today might not be available. First come, first serve tomorrow.
And I'll excuse us for going to the basics of all of this, because the importance from a book perspective is, there may be people in different jurisdictions who are still not adapting to a flex opportunity. So understanding some of the core fundamental principles of that challenge and that change is actually really important to frame. And I think it's quite an interesting one. How does, for me, what we're talking about with the flex and the hybrid, it speaks a lot about a cultural change and a sort of a psychological shift in mentality. Does technology get involved in flex and hybrid in any way? And if so, how does it get involved with the stuff that you're doing?
I mean, of course, technology is massively important, and technology's role is primarily to remove friction. So in this instance, the story that I just shared, the technology was important for us to be able to give their team members the ability to book the space. So they had to make a booking like they were booking a hotel room every time they came in. Slightly different behavior change than what they're used to, just showing up. They booked it to make sure they reserved their seat. They could also see who else is coming in, how many people are coming in. And, I think the technology can also play a role with making sure that the right people are connecting with each other on the same days. So if you make bookings in advance, okay, well, Amy's here on Wednesday. I'm going to go in on Wednesday because I need to talk to Amy in person. But also as an owner of the space and understanding the utilization, the data that you glean from that technology to understand, okay, what days are people coming in the most, triangulating that with how far people commute in and understanding different patterns, it helps you make decisions going forward on your real estate as well.
Got you. James, anything from your side?
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the future and what are you most excited about or hopeful about for the future of real estate? What would you like to see happen?
Well, I think if we can move away from the return to office conversation and look at it like let's return to humanity and be empathetic with people and give people the right environment that they need at the moment they need it, and empower them with the choice to make those decisions. To me, that's more important. And I believe that real estate has a role to play to removing friction, to making real estate more fluid and flexible, to allow that to happen. Give companies the ability to make that happen instead of saying, here's a white box that you signed up for 20 years, come back to me when you need a bigger one. But actually saying, we're going to help you have a great company culture and support your employees in every single facet of what they need.
And environment is fundamental to that, isn't it? So there's this really strange dichotomy, in terms of joy. So, we know what brings people joy is places with colour and maybe nature and social connection, all of these things. And somehow in the past, offices have been designed to be sort of the opposite of that, glass or concrete structures, no colour. How do you see that kind of thing changing? I mean, I love your approach to sort of focus on this return to humanity. What a wonderful purpose. How will offices do that, do you think?
Well, I think if we think back to the fact that the office no longer has the monopoly on work, and we can get our work done anywhere we are, as long as we have a great internet connection. Then how is the office going to be attractive for somebody? What is going to make somebody want to choose that building or that building or that building, versus working from home or going to a cafe? And it goes back to being stimulated and being motivated to come in, because it's going to give you that energy when you meet the right people. But I think it goes more to the brain though, versus the aesthetics. Aesthetics are absolutely important. They need to be pleasing. We need to touch all the senses. But I think curating content for that community, and I'm trying to fit in all the C's now, but but I think content becomes important because if you are a fintech company and you have a growth mindset and you're working for a fintech scale up, how is coming into the office going to help my career? Well, I'm going to connect with the right people. I'm going to have energy, but also, by the way, there's some programming going on that day that's going to teach me X, Y, and Z. It's going to make me think differently about my job or the world or society. So I think content is going to play a key role in the office in drawing people in on specific days as well.
Do you have, we're going onto a personal question now, do you have some offices or commercial real estate spaces that really make you feel it feels good to be here?
I mean, I have to always go back to 22 Bishopsgate.
Yeah, tell us about it. I mean, it's fascinating to hear about what you've done in that space.
Well, it's not my building. I'll hold my hand up and say that. I had the privilege of helping build an innovation hub there called Exchange. It's on level 7. But what I like about 22 Bishopsgate is the thinking that the team that put that building together and curated all of the amenities for that building, I think they got it spot on. And so when you come into that building, you've got an amazing arrival. You feel like you're welcome there. It's not a security guard saying, trying to keep the right people, wrong people out. So you feel hospitality walking in. And then you've got an amazing restaurant choices and food choices. It's aesthetically pleasing. It's comfortable, plenty of room. You're not in a basement somewhere grabbing some grub. Beautiful natural light, great views of London. They've got a gym. I know I'm ticking off some boxes, but
I'll be there next week.
Yeah, but they're thinking around the programming as well. So just yesterday, there were these PhD students who've launched companies going through a pitch day, and you've got NASDAQ in the building that could come down and network with those folks. And we've hosted Urban MBA, which is helping underprivileged people learn entrepreneurship skills in the same building that NASDAQ's in. You've got all sorts of knowledge going on that if you're an employee of any of these companies in the big offices on all the high floors, they can tap into and get energy from, and you've got all this knowledge exchange happening. So I think the way that building was put together was very well thought out. And I would, it's a massive building, so not every building is going to be 1 million square feet, but I think the same stack can be delivered in other buildings as well.
And operationally, Caleb, just talk to me about the productivity side. You've mentioned about productivity a couple of times, and the justification for me asking this is the fact that I've held a thesis that a lot of the future of real estate depends on two things. A lot of the changes that we have, and that for me was around the challenge of affordability and the challenge of sustainability. Now, I was challenged this week on that, saying that, yeah, that's fair enough, James. You're absolutely right. Yes, affordability is important and it's impacting globally. And yes, sustainability is impacting the industry and it is a global challenge. But actually, if you come at it from the real estate perspective, probably the largest challenge for them is producing a more productive workforce. And that's what they want. So what resources about hybrid and flex would you say I should be reading and Amy should be looking at in terms of proving that sort of flex and hybrid make a more productive workforce? Have you got any good tips that we should be looking at?
There is Dr. Gleb. There's oh man, I'm drawing a blank now, but and he's gonna message me later and say, why didn't you remember my name?
Dr. Gleb.
Gleb, Gleb. He's producing a lot of I don't know, I'll tell you his name. I'm going to say his name wrong, but it's Sipursky, T-S-I-P-U-R-S-K-Y. He produces a lot of content on research around hybrid. But I think we should be talking to the companies that are making it successful, not just paying attention to what Google and Facebook does or Meta, but let's look at the scale-ups out there. Let's look at the companies that have 20 and 50 people who started in the pandemic with no offices and became a success. By the way, which many of them are using offices today, but not in the same way that we used to use them.
Do you know how they are measuring success when it comes to sort of productivity side, or is it just traditional business metrics that they're showing an uptick in improvement, or is there anything very specific that can be pinned back to the way they're working? Because I don't know is the really honest answer on it.
Yeah, I think everybody's trying to learn this right now, and nobody has the exact answer, and the exact answer for one company might be different than someone else anyways. But I think tying success and productivity back to an office, I think, is the wrong question.
Okay.
I think how an office can contribute, but I don't think the office is what makes it successful. I think what is, as a company, as a leader, what do I have to do? As a startup, we have KPIs that we need to hit to be able to raise money, be able to satisfy customer requirements. How do we facilitate that? And today, we need to get people together. Well, if I've got a team member in Paris and I've got a team member in Essex, and then I've got a team member in Canada, I can't bring them all together into an office. So I need to be able to have technology to do that. But I might bring my Paris person up to London and Essex, and we might meet and then bring the other people in virtually. So, wherever I go to do that, it's got to facilitate that from a technology perspective.
Yeah.
But sorry, I know Amy, you want to ask a question there, but I think if we think about the larger companies that might have, 300 people in the same office that maybe aren't coming in every single day together, but they can. It is important to understand how often people coming in, why they're coming in, how long they're staying, are they happy when they leave, and then can you correlate that to any sort of trending business success? Probably. I don't have full answer on that myself.
I think it's fascinating, isn't it? Because beforehand, and there seems to be a narrative that people need to be in the office to be successful, and that just because people aren't returning and they might only be in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, then it's really, really bad. But I think that comes from a real estate owner mentality rather than a workforce mentality and a societal perspective of it all. So I think that's a really interesting take, that you've got to be in the office to be successful and to improve. So I do entirely agree with what you've just said on there. But thanks for Dr. Gleb, and what was the other person's name? How did you pronounce it? Because then I'll pronounce it a different way, and we're bound to get it right somehow.
Well, Dr. Gleb was the only person I mentioned.
Oh, it was? Okay.
Yeah, I pronounced his surname the best way that I could. I've only met him virtually, by the way, in the metaverse. But I got his newsletter.
Oh man, we should be doing this in the metaverse, Amy. What are we doing? I've done a couple, and they're great fun. We need to get Chris on here and get us in the metaverse for the future discussions that we're having. In fact, we should probably do that. Chris Molek, come on, message me, mate. We'll sort that out. Amy, you were bound to jump in with a question. I saw you jumping in. I've got a few more. I just want to sort of finish off on some.
Go on. You go ahead.
Well, I mean, I was just going to come back to Brave, actually, because I find it there's two things. Number one, I'm really interested in the board that you've created, Caleb, to help you. And in doing so, I'm interested in the skills and the insights of the various board people that you've got to help you and advisors, because that, I think, informs me as to where you think this is all going. So I'd like to sort of ask you about each of the different board members and say, well, why have you picked them? Because I think that's quite interesting. And then secondly, in terms of your mission to challenge the status quo of the sector, which we've talked about, so this is the first question. What challenges do you see the real estate industry currently has when it comes to the sort of the flex space that we've got? And in this, I'm not necessarily talking about the SMEs, because I think there's a natural move for those smaller, medium-sized businesses to take on flex. I can see it. I think I'm seeing the challenge on the much larger businesses, and there's a little bit more inertia in terms of taking on flex. I could be entirely wrong, but it's sort of what I get a sense of. So what challenges are you seeing for them to take on flex?
I don't see challenges on the customer side. I think customer demand's there. The challenges on the supply side is a huge gap between supply and demand right now on flex. And if you look at the overall market, flex at the most in the best markets is probably barely knocking on the door of 10% of the overall market, but demand's skyrocketing, 10x in some markets.
Okay, and so flex on supply side is why? The instability of the possible model, that they'd rather take on a massive long lease. What's the problem?
Yeah, it's easy to spot why. It's not easy to necessarily spot the solution to it, but why is because of the way the business plan of traditional real estate, the way we value buildings, the way real estate model values a long-term lease, guaranteed income from a high covenant tenant. And for 100 years, that's been the model accepted, and that's what companies have had to do. And this is why entrepreneurs, when in the past, when the first thing you thought of when you decided to get to start a business is, where do I get an office? But we don't have to do that anymore, because we can start at our kitchen table and work remotely. But at some point, we want to bring people together and get a place to meet and collaborate and have these sort of human experiences. But if I've got to sign a 20-year lease to do that, it doesn't work, which is why flex industry has gotten really big. The large companies are looking to embrace flex. We're seeing, as these leases expire, we're seeing companies shrink their footprints. They want to be more dynamic and say, okay, I don't need 3 floors, I need 1. But right now, some are taking more space than what they need because they don't know, because we're in this influx. We're learning how we work differently today. But the whole reason is the financing and the valuations. If if you've got income that is very volatile right now in coffee sales, month-to-month memberships, meeting room bookings, this and that goes up and down on a daily basis. But if you look back over 2 years, you see a trend line. It's not guaranteed to continue for the next 2 years, but it probably will. But we're not valuing that future potential revenue because it's not guaranteed into a lease. And so therefore, the business plan is different. It requires a different risk profile and return profile. But real estate's full of low risk, smaller yields. Yes, you have value add opportunistic investments as well, but it's different when you go to sell the building and you've got a lot of flex revenue that's not guaranteed. That's the problem.
Who struggles with that more? Is it the owners who haven't got the guarantee, therefore it's not easy anymore? Or is it on the financial side with all the valuation aspect? Where is the pain point on that bit?
Well, 2 things. Everything I just said has been the pain point for flex in general.
Yeah.
There's a current pain point right now that supersedes that. That's high interest rates and the cost of capital, and which leads to the cost of capital being too high, but also the supply chain costs. So that in itself, which will settle over the next, maybe 2 years. So that'll go away and we'll be back in a nice money market. But still, the valuation piece that I described a moment ago will be there unless we have a different investor profile come in. Now, there's a lot of institutional money that's invested in real estate that requires bond-like returns, guaranteed income to pay out retirement accounts and insurance premiums and all that stuff. So you can't take that risk. But I predict, might be wrong, but I think those companies, those investor profiles will shift over time, and we'll have a high, we'll have a different yield and risk profile investor coming into real estate, because real estate is becoming more operational and more flexible. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's crying out for that person, that group, that company. Simple.
There's, you know, look, I'm not the only one saying this, and there's certainly people that disagree that are saying that they disagree, and that's fine too. I think this is a healthy conversation to be having right now. But you know, I'm not the only one saying this, and there is money out there looking and actively investing in this space, and I think the future is very exciting. I think we're in a transition period, and it won't all flip to 90% flex overnight, but I think over the next 10, 15 years, it'll definitely get up to 50%. Definitely.
It's going to be interesting though, isn't it? Because I certainly another trend that I'm starting to see, and it started in the US, it's coming over here, and this is more broad office stuff, Caleb, is there's a transition from traditional office to flex, which is one thing we've talked about. There is a potential movement from office to residential as well, which I think I'm starting to see, and I can actually see the reasons why that's happening. Although again, the valuation is the challenge, because office valuations are significantly higher than residential. I've been hearing sort of 30 to 40% minimum of a revaluation to make it even likely to happen. I've just got I'm a little bit, I could say probably unfairly pessimistic about the office sector because of all of this uncertainty and all this change it's about to go through. What is that unfair of me to say that I'm a bit pessimistic about the sector because of the sort of insecurity on it, or am I wrong to think that? And actually, this is where the opportunity is for someone to be very clever about it.
Well, I think anytime there's pain, people become pessimistic. But I think anytime there's pain, there's also opportunity. So it's not unrealistic to worry. And I think there's a lot of money at stake here, of course. I think there's a huge opportunity ahead, but there's going to be a lot of pain in that opportunity for some. So I know that was a very ambiguous answer there, but yeah, I see the opportunity. I think there's a lot of change coming, and those who are leaning into it are going to win.
Any examples of people who are leaning in that you know of?
Yeah. Well, other than Brave Corporation, I like what Ryan Simonetти is doing at Convene. The Office Group's been around this for a long time. They're doing some good stuff. I think for partnership, Basil Demirudis is leaning into this. There's I can't name this name, but there's another fund that's coming out and raising a lot of money to buy and reposition assets for this purpose. And this isn't just UK. This is across Europe. I think there's going to be a huge amount of opportunities in North America. Yeah,
agree entirely. Ames, anything for you to
just a quick question, picking up on Caleb, you obviously have a very growth mindset, and that's something that others in this industry are going to need as well to kind of ride through these risks and these uncertainties to cash in on these opportunities. Can you tell me a little bit about you? This is the psychologist talking now. Can you tell me a little bit about you and the team that you work with? How do you manage those kinds of risks and uncertainties? What do you do as a team to get you through that in order to, take up these opportunities when they come your way?
Maybe I should jump back on my couch back there for this one.
Lie down, lie back, relax.
Lots of coffee. But no, I think my nature has been that risk taker, so to speak, and throughout my life and career, I've sort of taken risk, and sometimes they've worked out, and sometimes I've learned. But I think that it's important as anybody taking risk. It's important, particularly for entrepreneurs, to surround themselves with people that are plugging the holes and the gaps. You know, I didn't go to Reading University and get my degree in real estate. I didn't start out my career in real estate. I came into this through the flex sector back in 2007, and have been in different vehicles since. But as an entrepreneur, I look at gaps and problems and try to figure out how to solve them, and that's where the risk comes in, because when you're trying to solve problems, you're going to make mistakes. So it's important to take big risks, but then surround yourself with people to make sure that if you make mistakes, it's a calculated mistake that, you know, you can hedge almost. If that makes any sense.
It does. What's the best risk you ever took?
Moving to the UK from the US 10 years ago, you know, where I didn't know anybody. But you know, it's worked out. And I've seen all of Europe, and that's been a good part of it.
What fun.
But yeah, no, I think business wise, every time you start a company, it's a risk.
Very true. Very true. All right. I think, unless Amy, you've got anything else to go through, I'm going to end that stream, I think, on there. Happy with that? Cool. All righty. I'm just going to end that in there. Thanks, Caleb, publicly for joining us.